The morning sun barely filtered through the tall windows of courtroom 7B. The room felt cold despite the summer heat outside. Jack Miller sat on a hard wooden bench in the back row. His small 10-year-old legs dangled above the floor, not quite, long enough to touch the ground. He wore his best clothes, khaki pants, a light blue button-up shirt, and the clip-on tie his dad had helped him with that morning. His brown hair was neatly combed to the side, but one stubborn lock kept falling across his forehead. Jack watched as adults moved around the courtroom like players on a stage. Men and women in dark suits carried folders and whispered to each other. The court clerk typed on her computer, the clicking sounds echoing in the high-ceilinged room. A police officer stood by the door, looking bored but alert. In the front row sat his parents, but not together like they used to sit at his school plays. His mom, Lisa Miller, sat on the left side with her lawyer. She wore a navy blue dress and had her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Jack could tell she had been crying again. On the right side sat his dad, Greg Miller. He looked tired in his gray suit. His shoulders slumped forward as he leaned to whisper something to his attorney. Dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't been sleeping well. When he turned and caught Jack's eye, he tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. For almost a year now, Jack had been shuffled between two homes. 1 week with Mom in her small apartment near the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The next week with Dad in the house where Jack had his own room with all his favorite things. The house where he had lived his whole life until his parents started fighting all the time. Jack remembered the night everything changed. He had been in bed pretending to sleep when he heard the dishes breaking and his mom crying. The next morning, Dad was sleeping on the couch, and Mom told Jack they were going to stay at Grandma's house for a while. That while turned into weeks, then months, and now here they were in court. All rise for the Honorable Judge Henry Blackwell, the bailiff called out. Everyone stood up as the judge entered. Judge Blackwell was tall and thin with gray hair and glasses that sat low on his nose. He wore a black robe that made soft swishing sounds as he walked to his seat. The judge had a face that looked like it was carved from stone. People called him Stoneface because he rarely smiled and always followed the rules exactly. "Be seated," Judge Blackwell said in a deep voice that filled the room. Jack sat back down, his heart beating fast. This was the final hearing that would decide where he would live. His school counselor, Ms. Peters, had explained it to him last week. She told him the judge would listen to both his parents and then decide what was best for Jack. But nobody had asked Jack what he wanted. "We are here today in the matter of Miller versus Miller regarding custody of the minor child, Jack Miller," Judge Blackwell said, looking down at the papers on his desk. "This is the final hearing in this matter. I have reviewed all previous testimonies and reports. Counsel for Mrs. Miller, you may begin." Lisa's lawyer stood up. She was a tall woman with short black hair named Ms. Diaz. "Thank you, Your Honor. As the court is aware, Mrs. Miller has been the primary caregiver for Jack throughout his life. Even while working as a nurse, she has arranged her schedule to be present for all of Jack's important events and daily needs." Ms. Diaz walked slowly in front of the judge's bench. "Mrs. Miller has created a stable environment in her new apartment. Jack has his own room there. She has arranged her work schedule to be home when Jack returns from school. Her mother lives nearby and helps with childcare when needed." The lawyer continued talking about Lisa's good qualities as a mother, how she attended all parent-teacher conferences, how she took Jack to his doctor appointments, how she helped with his homework and made sure he ate healthy food. Jack shifted uncomfortably on the hard bench. What Ms. Diaz said was mostly true, but she didn't mention Frank. Frank Johnson was Mom's new boyfriend who had moved into the apartment 6 months ago. He worked from home selling insurance, which meant he was always there when Jack stayed with his mom. At first, Frank had been nice, playing video games with Jack and ordering pizza. But things changed after the first month. Frank started getting angry when Jack made too much noise. He said Jack was spoiled and needed stricter rules. When Mom was working night shifts at the hospital, Frank was in charge, and those were the nights Jack dreaded. Ms. Diaz finished her presentation by showing some pictures of Jack and his mom together at the park and at his school science fair. As you can see, Your Honor, Jack is thriving in his mother's care. We ask the court to grant primary physical custody to Mrs. Miller with reasonable visitation for Mr. Miller. Next, his dad's lawyer stood up. Mr. Peterson was older with white hair and a friendly face that reminded Jack of his grandfather. Your Honor, while we do not dispute that Mrs. Miller loves her son, we believe Jack's best interest would be served by living primarily with his father. Mr. Peterson talked about how Jack had lived in the family home his whole life, how his school was just 3 blocks away, how his friends all lived in the neighborhood, how Greg had adjusted his work schedule at the construction company to be home by 3:30 each day when Jack got out of school. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Peterson continued, we have concerns about the stability of Mrs. Miller's home environment. She has moved twice in the past year. She often works overnight shifts, leaving Jack in the care of her boyfriend of only 6 months. Mr. Miller can provide a more consistent and familiar environment. Jack's stomach tightened at the mention of Frank. He reached into his pocket and felt the folded pages from his journal. Ms. Peters had suggested he write down his feelings about the divorce and his time at both homes. What had started as simple entries about his day had turned into a record of what happened when he was alone with Frank. The entry from last Tuesday was the worst. Mom had been called in for an emergency shift. Frank had gotten angry when Jack spilled juice on the carpet. He had locked Jack in his room for hours even when Jack needed to use the bathroom. When Jack finally couldn't hold it anymore and had an accident, Frank had called him terrible names and made him sleep on the wet sheets as punishment. Jack hadn't told anyone about what happened with Frank. Frank had made it clear that no one would believe him. Your mom will think you're making it up to live with your dad, Frank had said. And if she has to choose between you and me, who do you think she'll pick? But last night, after reading a library book about children's rights in court, Jack had made a decision. He had carefully torn out the most important pages from his journal and hidden them in his pocket. If the judge was going to decide where he should live, then the judge should know the whole truth. As the lawyers continued to argue, Judge Blackwell looked increasingly frustrated. He interrupted both of them several times with questions about schedules and school arrangements. Finally, he held up his hand for silence. I've heard enough from both counsels, Judge Blackwell said, adjusting his glasses. Based on the evidence presented and the reports from the custody evaluator, I'm ready to make my ruling. The courtroom grew completely silent. Jack's mom reached for her lawyer's hand. His dad sat up straighter. Your Honor, I've considered all the evidence presented by both parties, Judge Blackwell said. And while I understand Mr. Miller's concerns, I'm inclined to grant primary physical custody to Mrs. Miller, with liberal visitation rights for... Jack couldn't wait any longer. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood up from the bench. His voice came out louder than he expected in the quiet courtroom. He hurts, Jack said, his words echoing off the walls. Everyone turned to look at him. The judge stopped mid-sentence, his gavel frozen in the air. Excuse me? Who spoke? Judge Blackwell asked, peering over his glasses. Jack's legs shook, but he forced himself to stay standing. He hurts me, he said, his voice stronger now. The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Blackwell's face turned white as paper as the meaning of those 2 simple words sank in. The courtroom remained frozen in silence after Jack's words. Judge Blackwell slowly placed his gavel down on the bench, his hand slightly trembling. The color had drained from his face, leaving it as white as the papers scattered across his desk. Young man, please approach the bench, Judge Blackwell said, his voice much softer than before. The usual stern tone was replaced with genuine concern. Jack stood rooted to the spot, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. His mom had turned around in her seat, her hand covering her mouth in shock. His dad had half risen from his chair, looking confused and worried. It's okay, Jack, Judge Blackwell said, sensing the boy's fear. You're not in any trouble. I just want to talk to you. The court officer moved toward Jack and gently guided him forward. Jack's legs felt wobbly as he walked down the center aisle. His hand clutched the folded journal pages in his pocket so tightly that his knuckles turned white. As he reached the front of the courtroom, both his parents started to stand. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, please remain seated for now, Judge Blackwell ordered. He turned to the court clerk. Ms. Wilson, please call Ms. Harris from Child Protective Services. Tell her it's urgent. Then he looked at the bailiff. Officer Perry, I'd like to speak with the boy in my chambers. Please ask Ms. Allen, our court advocate for children, to join us immediately. Jack stood in front of the judge's high bench, feeling very small. Judge Blackwell leaned forward and removed his glasses, revealing kind eyes that contradicted his stern reputation. Jack, is there something you want to tell me? Something about someone hurting you? He asked gently. Jack nodded, his throat feeling tight. He pulled the crumpled papers from his pocket with shaking hands. I wrote it all down, he said quietly. Mom's boyfriend, Frank, when she's at work. Judge Blackwell's eyes widened slightly as he took the papers. He glanced at them briefly, then folded them carefully and stood up. We'll take a 30-minute recess, he announced to the courtroom. Ms. Diaz and Mr. Peterson, please remain. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, you'll be called back shortly. Jack, please come with me. Jack followed Judge Blackwell and Officer Perry through a side door behind the judge's bench. They walked down a carpeted hallway to a large office with bookshelves covering the walls. A woman with curly gray hair was already waiting inside. She had a kind smile and wore a bright blue sweater. Jack, this is Ms. Allen. She helps children. In court, Judge Blackwell explained. She's going to stay with us while we talk, okay? Jack nodded as Ms. Allen extended her hand. Hello, Jack. You can call me Susan if you'd like. They all sat down, with Jack taking a big leather chair that seemed to swallow his small frame. Judge Blackwell no longer looked scary without his robe. He looked more like a regular grandpa in his white shirt and tie. Jack, I'm going to read what you wrote, and then I'd like you to tell me more about it. Is that okay? The judge asked. Jack nodded again, fidgeting with the edge of his clip-on tie. The room was quiet as Judge Blackwell read through the journal pages. His face grew more serious with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully and took a deep breath. Jack, how long has this been happening? He asked. Jack stared at his shoes. Since Frank moved in with Mom, about 6 months ago. And you haven't told anyone until now? Jack shook his head. Frank said no one would believe me. He said Mom would choose him over me if I told. Ms. Allen moved her chair closer to Jack. That must have been very scary for you. It was very brave to speak up today. Jack looked up at her, his eyes filling with tears. I didn't want to go back there. Not if the judge said I had to live with Mom most of the time. Can you tell us more about what happens when your mom is working? Judge Blackwell asked. Jack started talking slowly at first, then the words came rushing out like water from a broken dam. He told them about how Frank changed when his mom wasn't around, how he called Jack names and made fun of him, how he would lock Jack in his room for small mistakes like spilling food or leaving toys out, how he sometimes didn't let Jack eat dinner as punishment, how he made Jack sit in the dark closet when he cried too loudly. As Jack spoke, another woman entered the room quietly and sat in the corner taking notes. She wore a badge that said Child Protective Services and introduced herself as Ms. Harris. When Jack finished talking, he felt empty and tired, like after being sick with the flu. Judge Blackwell handed him a tissue for his tears. Jack, you did the right thing by telling us, Judge Blackwell said firmly. What Frank did was wrong. None of this is your fault. What's going to happen now? Jack asked in a small voice. We're going to make sure you're safe, Ms. Harris said. That's our most important job right now. There was a knock at the door, and Officer Perry stepped in. The parents are getting restless, Your Honor, and Mr. Johnson just arrived at the courthouse asking for Mrs. Miller. Judge Blackwell's expression hardened. Keep Mr. Johnson in the lobby. He is not to enter my courtroom. He turned to Jack. Would you like to stay here with Ms. Allen while I talk to your parents? Jack nodded gratefully. I'll be back soon, the judge promised, standing up and putting his robe back on. After the judge left, Ms. Allen brought Jack a soda from a small refrigerator in the corner of the office. You must be thirsty after all that talking, she said with a smile. Jack took small sips of the cold drink, feeling the bubbles tickle his throat. He wondered what was happening in the courtroom now. What would his mom say? Would she believe him about Frank? Meanwhile, in the courtroom, Judge Blackwell had returned to his bench. The atmosphere was tense as both Lisa and Greg Miller sat anxiously waiting. "I've spoken with your son," Judge Blackwell began, his voice grave. "And I've read some very disturbing accounts written in his own words." He turned to Lisa. "Mrs. Miller, are you aware of how your boyfriend Frank Johnson treats your son when you're not present?" Lisa's face paled. "What do you mean?" "Frank takes good care of Jack." "That is not what Jack reports," Judge Blackwell said firmly. He read some passages from Jack's journal, carefully choosing ones that conveyed the seriousness without being too graphic. Lisa's hands flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "Jack never said anything." "I didn't know. Did you ever notice any changes in Jack's behavior? Any signs that something might be wrong?" The judge pressed. Lisa began to cry. "He's been quieter lately. He doesn't want to go to the apartment sometimes. But I thought it was just the divorce, the changes. I've been working so many shifts to save for a better place." Greg stood up suddenly. "I knew something was wrong. He's been having nightmares when he stays with me. He's been wetting the bed again, which he hasn't done since he was 5. I asked him what was wrong, but he wouldn't tell me." "Sit down, Mr. Miller," Judge Blackwell ordered. Greg sat reluctantly, his face flushed with anger. The judge continued. "Based on Jack's testimony and written account, I am immediately modifying the temporary custody order. Jack will reside with his father until a full investigation can be completed. Mrs. Miller, you may have supervised visits with your son, but under no circumstances is Mr. Johnson to be present." Lisa nodded through her tears. "I understand, Your Honor. I just want Jack to be safe. I had no idea. I would never let anyone hurt my son. We will also be appointing a guardian ad litem for Jack, an attorney who represents only his interests," Judge Blackwell added. "And Child Protective Services will be conducting a thorough investigation." As the judge finished speaking, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. Frank Johnson pushed past the court officer, his face red with anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Lisa called and said there was some problem with the kid. Judge Blackwell's face hardened. "Mr. Johnson, you are out of order. Officer Perry, please remove this man from my courtroom." As Officer Perry moved to escort Frank out, Frank pointed at Lisa. "What did that brat say about me? Whatever it is, he's lying. He's just trying to get his way." His outburst only confirmed what Jack had written. Greg had to be restrained by his lawyer as he lunged toward Frank. Lisa sat frozen in her seat, the truth finally sinking in. Back in the judge's chambers, Jack could hear the raised voices. Ms. Allen turned on the small radio on the judge's desk to block out the sounds. "Sometimes adults get upset when they learn difficult things," she explained. "But that doesn't mean they're upset with you." Jack nodded, feeling strangely calm now that the secret was out. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't have to face Frank alone anymore. The next morning, Jack woke up in his old bedroom at his dad's house. For a moment, he felt confused about where he was. Then he remembered everything that had happened in court the day before. His stomach tightened with worry, but there was also a feeling of relief that he hadn't felt in months. He looked around his room. Nothing had changed since the last time he stayed here. His baseball trophies still sat on the shelf. His model airplanes hung from the ceiling. The blue walls were covered with posters of his favorite superheroes. This room had always felt safe. Jack could smell bacon cooking downstairs. He got out of bed and put on his slippers. As he walked down the hallway, he could hear his dad talking to someone. When he reached the kitchen, he saw a woman sitting at the table with a notebook. She had short red hair and wore a gray suit. "Good morning, Jack," his dad said with a smile that looked forced. "This is Ms. Patterson. She's your guardian ad litem. Remember Judge Blackwell mentioned someone would be assigned to help you?" The woman smiled warmly at Jack. "Hello, Jack. You can call me Karen. My job is to make sure that everything that happens from now on is what's best for you. Jack sat down at the table where his dad had placed a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon. Does that mean you work for the judge? He asked. Not exactly, Karen explained. I don't work for your mom or your dad or the judge. I only work for you. I'll be talking to everyone involved in your case and then telling the court what I think is best for you. Jack took a small bite of his eggs. He wasn't very hungry, but his dad was watching him closely. Do I have to see Frank again? Jack asked, looking down at his plate. No, absolutely not, his dad said quickly, his voice tight with anger. Karen gave Greg a warning look, then turned to Jack with a gentler expression. Right now there's a court order that says Frank can't be around you, and you'll be staying here with your dad for now. What about Mom? Jack asked. Is she mad at me? Karen shook her head. Your mom is not mad at you, Jack. She's very sad about what happened, but she's sad at herself, not at you. She didn't know what Frank was doing, and she feels terrible about it. She wants to see you, Greg added, putting more bacon on Jack's plate. But the judge said any visits need to be supervised for now. That means another adult has to be there too. Jack nodded. He missed his mom but felt nervous about seeing her. Would she believe everything he said about Frank? Or would she think he made it up? After breakfast, Karen asked to speak with Jack alone. They sat in the living room while Greg cleaned up the kitchen, making more noise than necessary with the dishes. Jack, I know you've already told your story to Judge Blackwell and Ms. Allen, Karen said, but I need to hear it too so I can help you. Is that okay? Jack nodded and began telling his story again. He told her about the first time Frank yelled at him for making too much noise while playing video games, how Frank's rules got stricter and the punishments got worse over time, how Frank would act completely different when his mom was around, being nice and friendly. As he talked, Jack felt tears coming to his eyes again. He wiped them away quickly with his sleeve. It's okay to cry, Karen said softly. What happened? It was not your fault. You were very brave to speak up. I was scared, Jack admitted. I thought no one would believe me. That's what abusers often tell kids, Karen explained. They want you to stay quiet. But you were smarter than Frank. You wrote everything down and you spoke up when it mattered most. After talking with Karen, Jack felt tired again. His dad suggested they watch a movie together. Halfway through the film about a boy and his dog, Jack fell asleep on the couch. He woke up to the sound of the doorbell. His dad was talking to someone at the front door. Jack recognized his mom's voice and sat up quickly. Lisa Miller stepped into the living room. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Behind her stood an older woman with silver hair that Jack recognized as his grandmother, his mom's mother. Jack, his mom said, her voice breaking. She didn't move toward him, unsure if he wanted her near. Jack felt confused. Part of him wanted to run to her for a hug like he always did. Another part felt angry that she hadn't protected him from Frank, but seeing her sad face made the anger melt away. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. Lisa sat down on the edge of the couch, leaving space between them. Jack, I am so sorry about what happened. I didn't know what Frank was doing to you. He was always nice when you were there, Jack said. Lisa nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. I should have seen the signs. You didn't want to come to the apartment. You were having nightmares. You seemed afraid all the time. I thought it was just because of the divorce. Jack's grandmother spoke up from where she stood near the doorway. We've asked Frank to move out. He's gone, Jack. He won't be coming back. Jack felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Really? He's gone? Lisa nodded. Yes. The police came and made him leave yesterday. I would never let anyone who hurt you stay in my home. The police? Jack asked, his eyes wide. Greg sat down in the armchair across from them. Frank is in big trouble, buddy. What he did to you was against the law. The police are investigating him now. Jack hadn't thought about Frank getting in trouble with the police. He had only wanted to avoid living with him. Will I have to talk to the police too? He asked nervously. A special police officer who works with kids might want to talk to you, Karen explained. She had been sitting quietly observing the family interaction. But I'll be with you if that happens. The next few days were busy for Jack. He went back to school, where his teacher, Mrs. Cooper, seemed to know something had happened, but didn't ask questions. His best friend Billy was just happy to have him back in class after he had missed the previous day. On Wednesday afternoon, Jack had his first official supervised visit with his mom. They met at a place called the Family Center, a building with colorful rooms full of toys and games. A woman named Ms. Patel sat in the corner, watching them but trying to seem invisible. At first it felt awkward. Jack didn't know what to say to his mom. Lisa seemed nervous too, asking too many questions about school and his friends. "I'm staying with Grandma now," she told him as they played a board game. "I'm looking for a new apartment, one with a better room for you." Jack moved his game piece across the board. "Are you and Frank still together?" he asked, not looking up. "No, Jack. That's over forever," Lisa said firmly. "I ended things with him as soon as I found out how he treated you. I would never choose anyone over you. You're the most important person in my life." Jack felt relief wash over him. Part of him had still worried that his mom might not believe him or might take Frank's side. "The judge said I need to take some parenting classes," Lisa continued, "and I'm seeing a counselor to talk about what happened. I want to be a better mom for you." Jack looked up at her. "You're already a good mom. You just didn't know." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for saying that. But I should have known. I should have paid more attention." As they continued playing their game, Jack felt the tension between them starting to fade. His mom was still his mom. She had made a mistake by trusting Frank, but she hadn't known about the bad things he did. By the end of their visit, Jack felt comfortable enough to give his mom a hug goodbye. It wasn't the same as before, but it was a start. That night, as his dad tucked him into bed, Jack asked, "Dad, what's going to happen now? Will I live with you forever?" Greg sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't know yet, buddy. The judge will decide that later, after Ms. Patterson makes her report and your mom finishes her classes. But no matter what happens, you'll be safe, and your voice will be heard this time." "I'm glad I spoke up in court," Jack said sleepily. "Me too," Greg said, smoothing Jack's hair back from his forehead. "Those 2 words you said were the bravest thing I've ever seen. You saved yourself, Jack, and maybe other kids too." As Jack drifted off to sleep, he felt proud of himself for the first time in months. The fear that had been his constant companion was finally starting to fade away. Whatever happened next, he knew that the adults in his life were finally listening to him. 3 weeks had passed since that day in court when Jack spoke up. The early summer days were getting warmer and school would be ending soon. Jack sat in the waiting room of Dr. Bennett's office, flipping through a comic book without really reading it. His dad sat beside him, checking emails on his phone. Jack had been seeing Dr. Bennett twice a week since the court hearing. She was a child psychologist with curly brown hair and colorful glasses who helped kids talk about hard things. At first, Jack didn't want to go. He was tired of telling his story over and over, but Dr. Bennett didn't make him talk about Frank right away. Instead, they played games and drew pictures. She let Jack take his time. "Jack Miller," a friendly voice called. Dr. Bennett stood in the doorway of her office, smiling. "Ready for our session?" Jack nodded and followed her into the room. It was a comfortable space with soft chairs, shelves of toys, and art supplies. Jack's drawings from previous sessions were taped to one wall. "How was your week?" Dr. Bennett asked as Jack settled into his usual beanbag chair. "Okay," Jack said. "I had another visit with Mom yesterday. We went to the park with Ms. Patel." Dr. Bennett nodded. "How did that feel?" Jack thought for a moment. "Better. Not so weird anymore. Mom didn't cry this time." Over the next hour, they talked about Jack's feelings. Dr. Bennett had taught him to name his emotions instead of pushing them down. Today they worked on something new, recognizing that what happened with Frank wasn't his fault. Many children believe they did something to deserve being treated badly, Dr. Bennett explained gently. Jack stared at his shoes. "Sometimes I think if I had been quieter or cleaner or better at following rules, Frank wouldn't have gotten so mad." "Did your friend Billy come to your house last weekend?" Dr. Bennett asked. Jack nodded. Yeah, we played video games and made a mess with our Lego bricks. Did your dad get angry about the noise or the mess? No, he just asked us to clean up before dinner. That's how adults should respond to normal kid behaviors, Dr. Bennett said. Frank's actions were wrong, not yours. Nothing you did caused or deserved his treatment. As Jack left the session, he felt lighter somehow. Dr. Bennett had a way of lifting heavy feelings off his shoulders. In the car ride home, his dad asked, "Good session?" Jack nodded. Dr. Bennett said I'm making progress. Greg smiled. I can see that too, buddy. You're sleeping better, and you're playing with your friends. Again. When is the next court date? Jack asked, looking out the window. Next week, Greg replied. But you don't have to go this time. Ms. Patterson will represent you. Jack thought about Karen Patterson, his guardian ad litem. She had visited him several times, talking to him about what he wanted. She had also watched him during a visit with his mom and had come to his school to talk to his teacher. Will the judge decide where I'll live? Jack asked. Greg nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. Yes, but there's something I want to talk to you about first. He pulled into their driveway and turned off the car. Let's sit here for a minute. Jack felt nervous. Was something bad about to happen? Your mom and I have been talking a lot lately, Greg said, turning to face Jack. Not fighting like before, but really talking. We've both realized we made mistakes during our divorce. We were so busy being angry at each other that we didn't notice how it was affecting you. Jack waited, not sure where this was going. We've been meeting with a family counselor, someone who helps parents work together better, Greg continued. And we've come up with a new plan that we think might work. But we want to know how you feel about it. What kind of plan? Jack asked cautiously. Instead of the judge deciding which one of us you should live with most of the time, we're going to suggest a more equal arrangement. You would spend 1 week with me, then 1 week with your mom. She's found a new apartment just 10 minutes from here in the same school district. Jack thought about this. So I'd still see both of you? Yes, and we'd make sure you could call or video chat with whichever parent you're not staying with whenever you want, Greg explained. But most importantly, we would promise to get along better and never put you in the middle again. What about Frank? Jack asked, his voice getting quieter. Greg's face turned serious. Frank is completely out of the picture. He's not allowed to contact you or your mom. Actually, he's in a lot of trouble. The police investigation found out he had hurt other kids before you. Jack's eyes widened. Really? Greg nodded. Your bravery in speaking up helped the police find this out. You may have protected other children from getting hurt. Jack hadn't thought about that before. The idea that his words had helped others made him feel proud. So what do you think about the new plan? Greg asked. You don't have to decide, right? Now think about it. Talk to Dr. Bennett or Ms. Patterson if you want. I think I like it, Jack said slowly. As long as Mom is really okay without Frank. She is, Greg assured him. She's been working very hard in her classes and therapy. She wants to rebuild your trust. Later that evening, Jack called his mom on the phone. Their conversations had gotten easier over the weeks. Dad told me about the new plan, Jack said. What do you think about it, sweetie? Lisa asked. I think it sounds good, Jack replied. Dr. Bennett says it's important that I feel safe wherever I am. And do you think you would feel safe with me now? Lisa asked, her voice careful. Jack thought about his visits with his mom over the past weeks. She had changed in small ways. She listened more. She didn't check her phone all the time. She asked questions about his feelings instead of just telling him everything would be fine. I think so, Jack said. As long as you promise Frank will never come back. I promise, Lisa said firmly. He will never be part of our lives again. I've learned a lot about recognizing harmful people, and I will never let anyone hurt you again. Next week, Jack sat in Ms. Patterson's office. She had a desk covered with framed photos of kids and pets. She had told him these were all children she had helped over the years. So, Jack, your parents have submitted their new proposed custody arrangement to the court, she said. How do you feel about spending equal time with both of them? I think it's a good idea, Jack said. They're not fighting anymore. Ms. Patterson smiled. I've noticed that too. They're both putting your needs first now. Will the judge agree to it? Jack asked. I'm going to recommend that he does, Ms. Patterson said. Part of my job is to tell the judge what I think is best for you, and I believe this plan could work well. Both your parents have made significant changes. She showed Jack a document she had prepared for the court. It outlined his parents' progress, his mom's parenting classes and therapy, his dad's family counseling sessions, and their new commitment to co-parenting. The most important factor is that you feel safe and heard, Ms. Patterson explained. Judge Blackwell was very impressed by your courage in court that day. He'll take your wishes seriously. 2 days later, Jack sat between his parents in the waiting area outside Judge Blackwell's courtroom. This time he wasn't scared. Ms. Patterson had prepared him for what would happen. He wouldn't need to speak this time unless he wanted to. When they entered the courtroom, it felt different than before. There was no tension in the air, no lawyers ready to argue, just his parents, Ms. Patterson, and a lady from the court who took notes. Judge Blackwell looked different too. His face wasn't as stern. When he saw Jack, he actually smiled. Good morning, Jack, the judge said. I'm glad to see you again under better circumstances. The hearing was short. The judge reviewed the new custody plan and Ms. Patterson's recommendation. He asked Jack's parents a few questions about their commitment to working together. Based on the significant progress both parents have made and the recommendation of the guardian ad litem, I am approving this joint custody arrangement, Judge Blackwell announced. I'm pleased to see you putting your child's needs first. Before they left, Judge Blackwell asked to speak with Jack privately for a moment. Jack's parents waited by the door as Jack approached the bench. I want you to know something, Jack, Judge Blackwell said quietly. In my 20 years as a judge, I've seen many children in difficult situations, but few have shown the courage. You did. Those 2 words you spoke in my courtroom that day may have changed your life and possibly others too. Jack nodded, feeling shy but proud. If you ever feel unsafe again, I want you to remember that speaking up was the right thing to do, the judge continued. There are many adults who will listen and help. I will remember, Jack promised. As they left the courthouse, Jack walked between his parents. For the first time in over a year, they weren't pulling him in opposite directions. Instead, they were both moving forward together, with Jack safely between them. 6 months had passed since the day Jack spoke up in court. The summer had come and gone, and now autumn leaves crunched under his feet as he walked home from school. Jack was 11 now, having celebrated his birthday in August with 2 parties. One at his dad's house with his school friends and another at his mom's new apartment with family. The new custody arrangement had been working well. Jack spent 1 week with his dad in the family home, then the next week with his mom in her apartment just 10 minutes away. He kept the same school, the same friends, and both parents came to his soccer games regardless of whose week it was. Today was moving day again. Jack had his backpack full of homework and a small duffel bag with things he wanted to take to his mom's place. He didn't need to pack much anymore since he had clothes, toys, and books at both homes. As he turned the corner onto his mom's street, he saw her waiting outside the building. She waved and smiled when she spotted him. Jack noticed she looked different these days, more relaxed, happier. She had cut her hair shorter and didn't look as tired as she used to. Hey, buddy, how was school? Lisa asked, giving him a hug. Good. We're starting a new science project about volcanoes, Jack replied. I might need help getting supplies. We can go shopping for them this weekend, Lisa said as they walked into the building. I have a surprise for you upstairs. When they entered the apartment, Jack smelled something good cooking. But the biggest surprise was seeing his grandmother in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot. Grandma, what are you doing here? Jack asked, giving her a hug. His grandmother laughed. I've moved to town. I found a nice little apartment just down the street. This was big news. After his parents' divorce, Jack had missed seeing his grandmother regularly. She had lived 2 hours away, which meant visits were rare. She's going to help out sometimes, Lisa explained. And you can visit her any time since she's so close. That's awesome. Jack said, genuinely excited. Over dinner, they talked about Jack's school and soccer team. His grandmother asked about his friends and his volcano project. It felt good, sitting around the table together. Normal. Safe. After dinner, while his grandmother washed dishes, Lisa sat with Jack in the living room. "There's something else I wanted to talk to you about," she said. "I got a letter from Dr. Bennett today." Jack had finished his regular therapy sessions 2 months ago, though he still saw Dr. Bennett once a month for check-ins. "Is everything okay?" Jack asked. Lisa nodded. "More than okay. Dr. Bennett is starting a new group for kids who have been through difficult situations. She thinks you might be able to help." "Me? How?" "It would be a small group of kids who have experienced things like you did with Frank," Lisa explained carefully. "Dr. Bennett thinks you could be a good example for them because of how brave you were and how well you're doing now." Jack thought about this. He had never considered that his experience might help other kids. "Would I have to talk about what happened?" he asked quietly. "Only what you feel comfortable sharing," Lisa assured him. "The main point is to show these kids that speaking up can make things better, even when it's scary. You don't have to decide right away. Think about it and talk to your dad too." That night, as Jack lay in bed in his room at his mom's apartment, he thought about Dr. Bennett's offer. 6 months ago, he could barely talk about what Frank had done to him. Now the idea of helping other kids who were scared felt important. The next morning was Saturday, and his mom didn't have to work. They were eating breakfast when there was a knock at the door. Lisa opened it to find Greg standing there with a folder in his hand. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," he said. "But I just got this email from Ms. Patterson and thought we should discuss it right away." Jack was surprised to see his dad. Before the new custody arrangement, his parents had barely spoken to each other. Now they actually talked regularly about Jack's schedule and needs. They weren't friends exactly, but they weren't enemies anymore either. "Come in," Lisa said. "We were just having breakfast. Would you like some coffee?" Jack watched as his parents sat at the table together. His dad opened the folder and showed some papers to his mom. "Ms. Patterson sent the final report to close Jack's case," Greg explained. "The court is satisfied with our custody arrangement and how well Jack is doing. There won't be any more check-ins or reports needed." Lisa read through the papers. "That's wonderful news." Greg turned to Jack. "This means no more official supervision for your mom's time with you. The court believes everything is stable now." Jack felt relief wash over him. He had gotten used to the supervised visits, but it would be nice to just have normal time with his mom without Ms. Patel watching. "There's something else," Greg continued, pulling out another paper. "Remember how the police were investigating Frank? Well, he's going to jail. He pleaded guilty yesterday to child endangerment and abuse. He'll be in prison for at least 3 years. Jack's mom reached for his hand. "You're completely safe now, Jack. He can never hurt you or any other child for a long time." Jack nodded, processing this information. Frank going to jail meant that everything Jack had said was believed. The justice system had listened to a kid's words and taken them seriously. "Your mom told me about Dr. Bennett's group," Greg said. "I think it's a great idea if you feel ready for it." "I want to do it," Jack said decisively. "I want to help other kids know it's okay to speak up." His parents exchanged proud looks. A few weeks later, Jack sat in Dr. Bennett's office with 3 other children around his age. There were 2 boys and a girl, all looking nervous and unsure. Dr. Bennett had asked Jack to share his story first. 6 months ago, I was really scared all the time," Jack began. "My mom's boyfriend was mean to me when she wasn't around. He locked me in my room and called me names. He said no one would believe me if I told." The other kids watched him intently. Jack could see they understood exactly how that felt. "But I wrote everything down in a journal," Jack continued. "And when I was in court for my parents' custody hearing, I knew I had to say something. I stood up and told the judge 2 words. He hurts." The girl in the group, a small 9-year-old with braided hair, asked, "Weren't you scared to say that in front of everyone?" "I was terrified," Jack admitted. "But I was more scared of having to live with him again. Those 2 words changed everything. The judge listened. My parents listened. And now things are so much better." As the session continued, the other children began to share pieces of their own stories. Jack felt a strange new feeling, like he was making a difference just by being there, showing them that speaking up could lead to something better. After the group session, Judge Blackwell was waiting in the reception area. He still looked stern in his business suit, but his eyes were kind when he saw Jack. "Hello, Jack," the judge said. "Dr. Bennett told me you were helping with her new group. I wanted to stop by and see how you're doing." "I'm doing good," Jack said. "Really good, actually." Judge Blackwell nodded. "I'm glad to hear it. You know, your case has changed how I run my courtroom. I now make sure to ask children directly about their feelings in custody cases, not just listen to the parents and lawyers." Jack hadn't realized his actions had such an impact. In fact, the judge continued, the county court has implemented new training for all family court judges based partly on what we learned from your case. We're calling it the 2 words protocol, a reminder that sometimes the most important testimony can be the shortest. Jack felt a surge of pride. His 2 words, spoken in a moment of desperate courage, had rippled out to help other kids he would never even meet. As Jack left the building with his dad, who was waiting to take him to soccer practice, he looked back at the office where the group session had been held. 6 months ago, he couldn't imagine ever feeling safe or normal again. Now he had 2 homes where he felt protected, parents who put his needs first, and the knowledge that his bravery had made a difference. Those 2 words in court had not just saved him, they had started a chain reaction that would help many other children find their voices too.